All right, welcome back on the discussion front, ladies and gentlemen. From a financial industry standpoint, blockchain assures a massive disruption to the world of back office systems and ledgers. Now, why have we chosen the BFSI industry for this particular chat? I think the fervor in the banks and the insurance sector is evidently palpable, right? And the technology offers a potential to eliminate, they say, as much as $20 billion of cost from the financial sector. So this looks beyond promising, I would say. Now, the creme de la creme from the industry, we roped them in and they're all set now to discuss on how drastically does blockchain promises to change the backbone of the financial industry. They'll talk about the constraints, the required investments, and most importantly, the big question that we keep asking, is the financial and the insurance sector blockchain ready? Allow me to warmly welcome, because our speakers have been fairly diligent and they'll be right up on the screen. So let's warmly welcome Prasanna Lohar, the Head of Innovation and Architecture from DCB Bank. We'll also have with us Byju Joseph, the Executive Vice President, Information Technology from Future Generali. As a panel member, we'd also be joined by Pinak, Chakraborty, the Chief Information Officer from Airtel Payments Bank. And the session moderator would be Mr. Vivek Belgavi, the Partner and Leader, Fintech PwC India. But Vivek, before handing it over to you, I will ask you how are the festive vibes looking like? It's a celebration here tomorrow in India. Tell us how's the day going, and of course, we will talk about the context in question. Over to you.
Thanks, Shikha. I think it's probably after 2 years hiatus, and probably as we are between waves, looking forward to some celebration. It's probably one of my favorite festivals. It's quite social. It exudes of freedom. It's colorful. Looking forward to it for sure. How about you? All right. Why don't we get started with the conversation? It's been blockchain that way is very topical. As part of our fintech team, we've been tracking it. I developed a blockchain lab as well. We've been piloting and working on the use cases for last 4-5 years. But again, it went through we normally have this structure where some new technologies go through a lot of peak of hyper expectation, then a trough of disillusionment. Probably blockchain might have gone through more than a couple of such peaks and troughs in its journey. I do think the challenge is best described with a blockchain trilemma. How do we ensure it is decentralized between decentralization, scalability, and security? Where do we take our choices? I couldn't have asked for a better panel. We got a variety of voices from the industry to discuss through it. So really, we'll start from opening remarks and probably starting with you, Prasanna, on kind of opening remarks on the topic, right? Where do you see the opportunities? What's your view on it? And we'll just take an opening remarks and get deeper into our conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, Vivek, and good morning, Byju sir and Pinakji. So I think great to be here, and really it's a very great topic to be discussed, and that too at such a great stage. So I think, in my view, Vivek, I think what we have seen, right? So over last 500 years. Right. So if you see industry revolution 1, 2, 3, and 4, where we always say we are in the industry revolution 4, and within industry revolution 4, there are internet 1, 2, 3, and these days we talk a lot about Web 3. Right. And if you go back in the 17th century, followed by 18th, it took 100 years for one IR to second industry revolution. And the last couple of them are in a matter of 30 years, and maybe next one could be in the matter of 10, 12 years. Right. So I think primarily what we have seen internet adoptions in 1995 till now, there were a lot of magical things that happen around internet, right? So we could order some pizza, we could listen music. So every business model which was a physical is now available on the internet, including banking, right? The way we are here, banking, insurance, everything is available on the internet. And the way we have seen customer journey in the last 2-3 years, post Android, iOS came into our life, post demonetization. The evolution is becoming from collaboration era to the autonomous era. Autonomous era is coming up with the 5G, wearables, so many devices where we need a lot of trust, which may not be there internet kind of a world. So that's what blockchain comes and says, I am an internet 2.0. The way we have seen the speed of adoption of internet took 20-25 years for larger scale use cases. But here, if you see the overall worldwide adoption, and if you see digital asset adoption, or you talk about DeFi's, billions of 140 billion market cap today, since last couple of years, from 2 billion to, it's remarkable. And that too, the adoption of worldwide, I think 20-25% people are already utilizing or doing some kind of R&D around blockchain and relevant ecosystem, so-called NFTs, DeFi, right? Polygon kind of a company who acts as a next level company for a blockchain. Almost 80% projects are on NFT. So coming back, opening remark, Vivek, I think it's a beautiful time for every organization. Your competition is with your organization who is really adopting Web3 or not, or primarily blockchain kind of a technology. So it's not only blockchain, but it has to work cohesively with the other technologies. So let's discuss it around during our conversation. Yeah.
Thanks, Prasanna. I think you've highlighted one critical aspect, which for me is the anchor for a blockchain-related conversation, which is trust. While working on a policy paper, and I think there's a lot more layers of onion which has to be peeled, because we are working in an industry which some of the systems, including identity or some other mechanisms, have been set almost for 200 years. So some of it we might have to completely reimagine, and what does the trust system of the future look like? We'll talk a little bit more. Byju, if I get into the conversation, what are your opening remarks on what's your view on blockchain?
Thank you, and kind of inviting me to this particular esteemed panelist. And my take is, the hype cycle, that's over, and now the reality phases of this particular technology adoptions really will take place. And I would take this in my roadmap as the ultimate disruptor, and will transform not only financial industries, probably many other industries. So it is increasingly, receiving, media, political, legal, whether it is, even the business attentions. Generally, in my company, Generali's are trying to create a community only to just focus on this particular technology and see how can we leverage this. So what I say is, I just want to really see very recent announcement by Chartered Accountants Association, ICAI. Very recently, I read about it, saying that they will adopt this technology for audit purposes. It excited me, how things are started applying to the real problems and real problem solving, aspect. For me, today it is more experimental and to bring operational efficiency as of now. But in next 2-3 years, you will see it's bring transparency. It's become a part of your day-to-day operations. It's part of, like today, your IoT device or health monitoring devices, how this become normal. So that's why I am seeing this. From insurance industry perspective, my view as of now, it is everyone is looking at as an operational efficiency or experiment, and try and see whether this helps us, in terms of gaining some efficiency. That's what I have treated as of now.
Makes sense, Byju. Pinak, your views?
Sure. Good morning. Nice to be here, and fantastic comments from Prasanna and Byju. I would just like to add that this is an exciting technology in the sense that it can basically challenge what we have accepted to be norm in the industry. Trust that you mentioned, Vivek. So obviously, the trust is everywhere in banking domain where I operate, right? Right from the central bank to bank ourselves, right? We are basically providing trust. So now that model is getting challenged, right? The other aspect to it is that going forward, not really limiting it only to BFSI as a particular segment, right? Because finance essentially is part and parcel of one's life, right? So the entire life seems to be getting impacted, whether it is banking, insurance, or the way we communicate with one another, right? So I was reading one comment, somebody said, if I am sending a message, let's say to you, Vivek, right? Why should I send it to Facebook first, right? So peer-to-peer conversation they are talking about. So pretty excited about it, but I know there are still some challenges to be resolved, right? And challenges are many folds. I think Byju already touched upon few. One is of course the technological, second one is legal, third one is how prepared we are, right? We meaning in terms of skill set, we as engineers, designers. So I think there are few aspects that we need to resolve, but I'm pretty excited to be in this space. And I think the journey has truly begun. I mean, it is not only an academic paper now, as you said, you have been running a lab for some time. So I think really I'm looking forward to have some full-fledged product in production anytime soon.
Excellent. The other thought I just to complement what everyone spoke about, there are different impediments, and we'll discuss a little bit more. But one fundamental challenge that I see is, including the organization that I'm part of, and all of us is part of, like we have lived in organizations which are at some level largely centralized. I mean, we do empowerment at the last mile, but we do work in a very centralized function. A lot of our go-to-market motions are centralized. Our sales, marketing, everything we would want control. Whereas when we study the organizations who are, let's say, Web3 native, they work in a very different way. They adopt decentralization. They will have like purpose and community as their key functions, as opposed to sales and marketing. So probably some of the things sometimes I wonder, is it too young or hipster for our typical corporate world? But part of the adoption also has to be, I mean, there would be some efficiency which will come in as we try to adopt it in our current way of working. But probably more interesting stuff will happen if you're okay to completely turn it on our heads and be okay to seize control and still figure out how we can build business, right? So just some food for thought there. I'll move to the next segment, really kind of scraping the surface a little bit more on where are I know all of us might have done some pilots, studied about it, looked at the industry. So let's kind of, for our audience, lay out where all have we seen use cases for the financial services industry. Prasanna, starting from you.
I think there are quite a lot of work is happening. If you see worldwide, almost 80 central banks are working on the digital currency, so-called the central bank digital currency, which is a legal tender. And just imagine, over 5 years, at least 20 of them will be live. And just imagine if some interoperable standard comes, our worry about sending money across the globe, right, as a cross border, where we see a lot of challenges, too much of money.
Or too much FM also called it out, right? In our budget also called it out for this year.
Yeah. So digital rupee adoption certainly we'll see in a couple of years. Although it is said that next year it will come, but it will take its own time because there are a lot of things to do. Other use cases which I could see in a BFSI industry is primarily on the insurance, right? So wherein one of the insurance company in India, they have done for airlines insurance, right? So if your flight is delayed, automatically you will get a claim. Few of the use cases at DCB Bank, we have worked upon the opening of the ATM. So although it is not a pure play blockchain, but a complete audit trail, who has opened the ATM, what time he has opened, and whether that OTP is expired. So everything's happened on a blockchain, and it's a use case. It is designed in such a way that tomorrow another bank comes and says, we also want to be part of that whole chain, where the whole gamut of the ATM security, who has opened, who has entered the ATM. So that whole thing which we are already live since last 1 year or so. Primarily, there are some use cases at DC Bank. We have done inspection process with geotagging along with the guy borrower, right? So taking his photograph, put in the blockchain. So I think primarily use cases are primarily around network security or audit trail or taking care of a data integrity or a multi-party communication, how it is happened. Say example, we are now planning for account aggregator coming on the blockchain. So we are doing that proof of concept with along with one company, and we are utilizing the Infosys stack of API. This is what we are looking at. So there are larger use cases which are already adopted. One of them, along with the METI, IDRBT, CDAC, and IIT Bhilai, along with 11 banks, we are trying to create a decentralized video KYC. And it is at a concept level, and certainly if you get a nod, go ahead. I think in the next couple of years, our challenges around the KYC, VKYC, wherein we have to reinvest KYC, right? For every bank, it takes 5,000-6,000 rupees for one KYC. We can do away as a country all these challenges. So what I mean to say that, Vivek, there are a lot of use cases. If I talk about in our bank, we had done complete brainstorming couple of 4 or 5 days. What all use cases can go on blockchain? And we could see more than 30, 40 use cases can certainly go on blockchain, where not only my bank, but whole community of a bank can really work upon. So RBI Innovation Hub, which is trying to do some LCBG trade finance use cases in a, so that is at a concept level, work is happening. So I think IDRPT, all these guys, IFCA is working on some of those blockchain sandboxes, which can be helpful for blockchain companies, startups, and so on. There are some use cases along with the World Bank we did for water purification, right? And how do we measure the quality of a water at a certain time, which is calibrated with the help of IoT device and pumped it in a blockchain, and so that no auditor comes and see, yeah, this point in time, this much water was recycled. So wherever there is a trust required between multi-parties, example, fintechs, or wherever there is a handholding required, immediate smart handholding required when fund comes and fund has to be realized immediately. Against that, we have to give back some certificate. So those kind of use cases we are working on with our partners. Or wherever it is a network security is required, we are working with some startups to create that additional layer of on top of firewall or web application firewalls. So Vivek, if we talk about along with our Byju sir and Pinak, we'll come to know many more other use cases which we can work cohesively. I think largest adoption of blockchain, I think some of the companies are providing complete core banking on blockchain, right? What does it mean? So tomorrow, if you are bringing it, you don't have to worry about that ledger-based banking, and from day 2, you can operate on a peer-to-peer. But again, the question, right? So how do we control, right? That's another ball game comes into the picture. Even decentralized mechanisms which we are creating in form of a digital rupee. Question will be whether it will be retail or wholesale. How do we move ahead? I think these are my few of the inputs where use cases are happening. But over a period of 5 years, every use case which we have built today will be touched upon some blockchain platform. So if you talk about security or interoperability or scalability, I can name those companies who has done solution providing for these aspects. So in front of me, at least there are no challenges around interoperability, the interoperability between two blockchains, or security, or you talk about scalability. I think it's only a matter of a mindset change, adopt it and learn through the exercises, POCs, and actual experimentation. Yeah.
Great, Prasanna. Good variety of cases across. If I look at the product value chain, we spoke about payments, you spoke about credit, you spoke about risk processes, including client onboarding. That gives one framework for everyone to say where it can get used. Pinak, if I bring you into the conversation, where do you see the use cases? Let me cover the banking space first, and we'll discuss with insurance with Byju.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Vivek. So I already see some commonalities with Prasanna. So this is the beauty of these discussions, that possibly I can touch base with him later. So in our cases, if you look at it, so domestic remittance, right, that is one of the very prominent use case for the bank. And these remittances are basically sent by the bottom of pyramid guys, as we call them, right? So they basically get some money by working somewhere. And let's say they want to send money to some other bank account, which is away from the urban centers of India. So typically we have got the partners, we call them business correspondents, which is internal to us, but you also have retailers and merchants helping us, right? Now the settlement processes and the reconciliation processes between different merchants or the retailers, as we call them, because we have our APIs exposed with them in the current scenario, it is a very cumbersome process. There are multiple reasons for it. Main thing is that all of these retailers may not have a system which is capable of doing this batch settlement as typically happens, right? Exchanging files and then doing it later, right? So usually it is very convoluted for them. They may not have that much of IT processes, right? I mean, the IT power in order for them to do it, right? Because they are also sitting at some centers where they're accepting payments and sending it out, accepting money, actually, hard cash, and sending it out. So this is one use case where we think the entire reconciliation process, starting from the transaction, in fact, reconciliation comes later, but starting from the initial fund allocation to a merchant or a retailer, going back into the transactions and then settlement, that thing can be easily taken to a blockchain, right, which will reduce or basically improve the operational burden that Byju sir mentioned earlier, right? So this is one use case where we're looking at very, very aggressively. And on the other hand, what Prasanna mentioned, and here I thought there is a lot of synergy. Even our, if you look at our IT, the resources, here I am talking about not only a very basic server, the bare metal server, but the VMs that we have put on top of it. What is the antivirus that was applied, when it was applied, whether it runs a database on it, right? Whether it's a database server. If there is a database server, whether we have got any database activity monitor, DAM as we call it, right? And when it has run, when it has failed, what kind of alerts is generated, right? And then sometime what happens, you take the VM, you shut it down, and you might want to clone it, and then you might want to start it in a different hardware, right? So obviously it has got a history associated. So this is what I would say slightly at an experimental stage. But we thought it's a very interesting if you look at it, starting from when it basically gets mounted, first of all, right? Because we have Airtel as one of our main partners, right? And also, we are part of the Airtel group anyhow. So basically, the data center that we use, obviously, it's a complete isolated data center for the bank as regulated by RBI. So there is a complete network segregation. But on the other hand, our data centers are largely managed by Airtel, right? So now, starting from the provisioning of the server, then what purpose it was provisioned for, whether it was running a microservices. Later on, if somebody said, can we use a small piece of it, right, and run some other microservices, right? So as of now, the traditional ITSM model that we have, we thought blockchain possibly would be a best suited here because it removes trust, right? The entity itself carries trust, right? Because the trust is driven by the network, right? And it carries a history for a long time. So these are two primary use cases that we are looking at. Other than that, I think the other use case that we have similar to the insurance, right? So we are insurance distributor for many of the organizations using our own Bharti AXA, right? So there also we feel that when a customer comes in, and these are the bottom of the pyramid customer I am talking about, right? So their insurance requirement is pretty different, right? So they are looking for a very specific insurance. The insurance premium is very differently, designed. Micro insurances that we are calling about, right? So there are also the multiple players are involved, right? So one is of course us, then the customer himself or herself, then the insurance provider who possibly will be Bharati Life AXA or our other partners, right? So in that whole gamut of thing, again, the reconciliation becomes very important, and it is pretty cumbersome in the current process. I mean, once it goes well, then nobody really looks into it. Problem is that occasionally it fails, and when it fails, the tracing and resolving it becomes a problem, right? So I would I think stop here. But these are the three essential use cases. One is pretty internal to IT. The other two are related to the multiple partners in a business scenario. So these are two or three that we are looking at.
Nice, Pinak. I think just reaffirms the use case of auditability and traceability. I also want to share an anecdote on it. Bermuda is one of the countries which has been experimenting. A couple of Caribbean countries, because of the way they are structured, close to US, they have taken a little more punts. But there was a pilot. I was there a couple of years back, and there was a pilot which was being run where a bank was doing its settlement on a blockchain. The regulatory compliance on it was done by the regulator on a real-time basis. The regulator had a node on the blockchain, and PwC's audit team also had a node on the blockchain for them to do the audit. So you can have multiple stakeholders come on the same chain and do that job. So I think there are a lot of such pilots being run, but it gives a sense of what might be needed for this to become mainstream. Byju, your thoughts on use cases?
Yeah, sure. So while there are many experiments happening, really the outcome based usages really is not shaped up. For some examples, I'll give you we as an industry, okay, I've got around and created a so-called virtual consortium to share the no-claim bonuses. When somebody want to port a policy from one insurance to other, really wanted to exchange a no-claim bonuses. So let's say you're not incurred a claim on a particular insurer and you want to port that particular policy to a separate insurer. There is benefits you get. Yeah? Really, that's the area where really it doesn't have any, it's completely black box. So you need to have really the departments, each companies need to interact and then really verify those. There were no electronic medium to do it, but it's around 8 insurers we got together. We created those our own initiatives with a shared model. We created this blockchain. It's worked very well, but we could not scale it because of the participations, and there's no real consortium to build and govern this particular issue. So I'm really going to the challenges, but it was a beautiful, marvelous technology deployment which happened, and we worked. It's just a passion of some technologists go together from all insurance companies and build that. A really wonderful technologies solves many problems of our, portability. If it comes to real usability, Vivek, and there are too many things this can enable. If you decide today, I'm not happy with future Generali, you port your policy to somebody else and start initiating the claim from there. That's a usability which use cases we want, or we are experimenting to one of our like-minded partners too. But that remains an experiment at a very small scale. But a transformative initiative is required. Let's say I'm not happy with my bank account today in one particular bank. I want to transform to a Prasanna's bank. So how do I do it? So is there a possibility exists? Of course, this technology can enable that tomorrow. But we need to be changing, and we need to be adopting the change, like probably telecom industries started doing it. And it's not time it will be there. But going back to our own experiments, I'll try and give you 2-3 experiments we are doing within our own company, between our group company and the seeding company. So the one is reinsurance. We do seeding back to our Europe, Italian company reinsurers. So we have internally experimented seeding of reinsurance, facultative, non-facultative, all those seeding aspects internally, and we experimented. We found it so successful, and whenever a claim happens, automatically seeding back to the reinsurer can happen. And globally, also reinsurance is one potential area where we can really, really make it use cases 100% useful. And we are experimenting since it is a group. We have no compulsion or no issues. So we are already in the experiment phase, and we're going to make it as a live cases. Third area where we use cases, like I think Prasanna talked about KYC, but KYC, okay, is very useful cases, because once, let's say, Prasanna or Pinak done the KYC of a customer, why should I redo it in the insurance too? That's really a use case scenario. What we have done right now is we have on video onboarding of customers, checking the risk and acceptance and all those suitability and need-based and video-based interview on a AI-based interview. We have ensured that it is embedded into a blockchain. And tomorrow, if a customer wants that copy and take it somewhere, we should be doing that. But issue is our legal framework, and each company has its own nuisance and risk framework. That's actually resisting us to put this into a real usage. But we share with the customer back. This is your interaction with us, unchangeable. No one can tweak tomorrow. No one can edit that particular video back to the customer. So these are the areas where we experimented our own way of trying to leverage and experiment these technologies.
Thank you so much, Byju. Gave a good context to it. But one common refrain, and probably this is the last segment for us to have this chat. One common refrain across the room was on experiment, test, pilot, things like that, and that really set the topic of this discussion as well. So probably we'll go around the room for quick thoughts on what would be needed for this experiment to come out of a lab or a garage to become mainstream. What would be needed to be done by enterprises? What needs to be done by the regulators? What needs to be done by the larger industry or ecosystem or government? What might be needed to be done by technology providers? Because we're moving into a completely new economy. So why don't we go around the room and take thoughts there? Byju, maybe we'll start from you this time around.
Yeah. So from my experiment within the group, I came across probably high 5 issues. One is the speed. Okay, I mean, it depends on the technology. Of course, speed is come more very way away from 2 years when we started.
But throughput is a problem. Yeah.
Yes. So throughput is the problem, which I think surely everyone is working on. Everyone wants to work on. Okay. And second problem is, if I am Prasanna and Pink has to work out, there is no standard between us. We need to define a standard. That's where we need regulations, or let's say RBI is forming a fintech. I'm assuming that will happen. Everyone is trying to initiate, but what is the standard which we need to form so that interoperability across not only one industry, BFSI, I'm talking about, let's say, travel, or let's say anywhere else, right? Even government initiatives. That's one thing which we need to worry about it. Okay. And everyone is putting their own standard. And that is second one. Third one is basically the energy consumption, the cost at which I have to deploy the DLTs infrastructure is really probably taking small players away from it. But there are a lot of probably unless you have a startup with a lot of fund in place, there is kind of resistance to it. That is the third one. Fourth one is my risk team asked me, okay, about the privacy. Okay, like you talk about everything is secure and everything. You taken a KYC and you send it to, let's say, Prasanna. How do I ensure that how do you are really on control of that particular source of data, and how do you ensure that privacy is maintained? How do I take customer consent again when I transfer to Prasanna or Pinak? Okay, so these are questions still. That was the fourth question. Fifth question is, and environmental issues, right? I mean, our European arms really asked, okay, you're putting these servers here and there. So what is the energy consumption which you will add, or carbon credits you will add to this particular your entire thing? Okay, is there something which is government clearly defined? Okay, how much you can do or something else? These are the things which actually I found it really. But otherwise, technology is. I mean, there is nothing which will stop us to do.
Many fair questions, and I think answers to this will probably give us a path as well. Prasanna, your thoughts on what are the impediments and what needs to be done for it to become mainstream?
Yeah, so I think a very good question. And 2022, if you see last 4 or 5 years of journey, the exercises which Indian government has done with form of some national strategy, right? We had announced recently also. IDRBT talk about some of the company like the RBI Innovation Hub and IBM. They are working on many more activities out there. What is that needed just to support Mr. Byju is academia, right? How do we create those skill set? Today, if you start searching web developers, you will find lakhs of them. And if you today find out a blockchain developer, you will have hardly thousands, right? Maybe we have as a country around 12,000-13,000 as per the last statistics. That is why it's very, very important aspect how academia should adopt blockchain as a curriculum, which is already started now. Second, largely thing is what you said, tech companies. If you see 5 years before, Oracle was starting its own unit or Wipro, or you talk about TCS also. But today, now they are there. Now here onwards, we will see many more companies will have practices around or frameworks around how do you adopt blockchain per se. Infosys has its own practices. So that's, I think, more or less that problem is solved. Third angle, which we spoke about standardizing, is very, very much required. Say example, we are building digital rupee, but if it is not aligned with the other countries, CBDC, how do we do? It will happen only wholesale digital rupee or wholesale CBDC, only those adopted countries. But how worldwide we should have a standard where IMF also is looking at how we can have a better standard around it. So standard, not only standard should be around use case to use case basis, right? So may not be a technology, although we have a stack of blockchain the way we have TCP/IP stack. But if you have to look at the standards around particular use case, we need to have that angle to begin with. I think research, technology maturity is happening very heavily in the blockchain area. We had just 10-12 blockchain platforms in 17, and today we have at least more than 100. And every platform has its own use case. Talking about Hyperledger Indy or Hyperledger Cactus for interoperability, or talking about R3 for financial use cases, Hyperledger for some of those workflow use cases, Ethereum for NFTs or many others. Still, there are a lot of challenges, right? Gas fees and all. And there are some platforms, say example, Ethereum is charging you 100 units. This platform charge you 5 units or maybe 1 unit. Right, so we need to really elaborate or give leverage to these platforms so that they become a mainstream at a mainstream. So
both layer 1 and layer 2s, like just for the audience, like the layer 1 and layer 2s, yeah.
Yeah. And coming back, if I had to add up as individuals, what we have done, training internally to all of those people or all of those employees who are part of that SDLC, developer, QA, tester, so that they are able to sign it up. So this is my communication goes to other bankers. Whenever I talk, their auditor CISO call me and ask me, how do we sign up? So how do we have that maturity standard at the company level so that if you be part of along with the Pinakji and Byjuji in some use case, as a consortium, we know what is the standard, how we going to sign off. Then larger scale, how do we really control? Rather control, how do we have a better governance? Because blockchain brings decentralization, and if we are bringing some centralization, it is needed for running that use case, but it should not do away with the beauty of the technology. That's how we should look at it. So on a larger scale, there has to be a India forum, right, which talks about, yeah, these are the use cases for India. These are the top use cases. The way China has announced 500 plus use cases. Now, it is not surprise China is spearheading blockchain journey compared to other countries, while US and there are many more are trying. There are blockchain countries, right? Estonia or Dubai is also on that part. India should look at that larger view. Some MIDI is there, but we need additional view who is primarily a blockchain officer for a country, who is really taking ahead, because that's how we have seen other countries are going ahead. This is a high time to look at that aspect. Yeah.
Great point. Great point. A lot of good thoughts there. We're almost at the end of time. Pinak, quickly your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think, excuse me, I think most of it are covered by Prasanna and Byjuji, but I will just quickly mention. So one is definitely the countrywide standardization, or what are the use cases that we are looking at. That definitely is important, right? Otherwise, we are working in silos, and then the peer-to-peer connection is becoming a very closed network, which is obviously not the purpose to begin with, right? The other thing is that within the management community, I mean, beyond IT, if I look at it, right? So I think, I mean, obviously I can talk to you or Prasanna and Byjuji later, but I think from the IT team's viewpoint, right, are we able to quantify the benefits out of the blockchain, right? Apart from solving our operational issues and peer-to-peer framework that all we want as a philosophy, right? Apart from that, in terms of very hardcore number, right, are we able to quantify it? I think we are a bit of a struggling there, right? And the other point, I think Prasanna already mentioned, and I think Byju sir mentioned, the concerns about the privacy. If every node has got data of everybody else, right? I think we are talking about having another set of public and private key pair, which will restrict some access apart from what is essentially needed. But those things are not very clear even to the security community, right? So I think Prasanna made this point that if they have to certify and say this is good to go in production, what are the things they should be concerned? What are the things they should be looking at, right? So I think overall, this technology is still, I would say, excites people. But overall, I think the larger industry forum is needed, where we exchange the ideas and then we say, well, this is the standard, we believe it has worked fine for a few of these use cases, covering the entire gamut of things, not only IT, the security aspects of it, legal aspects of it. So for example, in peer-to-peer framework, right, some transaction, suppose it goes wrong, right, because we cannot really think it will never fail. As you all know, as it is said, right, that anything that can fail will fail eventually, right? So who will basically be legally accountable for it, right? That point in time, we cannot say if it was peer-to-peer, then only two people are responsible, right? How the money will be recovered, right? How the chargeback process that works now in the card industry, how it will work.
Point made. I think if I have to summarize, I would think the clear outcome is it will take a village, it will take all of us, it will take the industry, it will take the government and the society for us to transcend this to next level of adoption. Thank you so much for your time. I wish we had more time, but very involving topic, great thoughts. Shikha, back to you.
Vivek, thank you very much for chairing the session, and thank you so much to the panel for sharing so many insights and also around how important it is to remove those complex processes that have been governing the opaque payments and the settlement systems, the insurance companies and the startups, how they're really adapting to the change that we spoke about and using the technology to detect those frauds, maintain security, maintaining those medical records, the file claims, and all that you brought to the table. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. And yes, of course, it's all about designing those delightful customer experiences at the same time. We wish you the best of the rest of the conference as well. And to all my audience members now, I know you blocked your date and time for the Economic Times Blockchain Summit. And in all our earnestness, we at ET Edge will ensure that it is worth your time. So we will come back. Let me have a look at the agenda. We'll come back, yes, just in a minute with a special address on blockchain and the unrealized potential of data. We'll be right back.
Thank you.